We will begin the conference. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your attention in this Zoom International Conference. We are pleased to share the project results with you, and I will present first well, today, June 22, we will present the results of our Export Post-COVID project funded by ANIT, the National Agency of Research in Chile. The objective of this project are, the general objective is analyze the consequences of the COVID-19 crisis on the export competitiveness of food companies in the macro southern zone of Chile. In the specific objective, we have analyzed the effectiveness of Chilean export promotion public policies proposed due to COVID-19 to support Chilean exporters. Also, analyze the firm's export dynamic capabilities and competitiveness in COVID-19 times, and also strengthen scientific research capacities in the macro southern zone in the field of business internalization, and transfers knowledge to the relevant actor of the science, technology, and innovation ecosystem at the regional, national, and international level. Well, with this conference, we will go with all of our specific objectives, sharing some of our results and share with the audience different aspects of our research. Our team in the project we are 4 researchers from 4 countries, 2 from Europe, Nathaniel Massa from Malta, and Joaquin Monreal from Murcia, Spain. And thank you, Nathaniel and Joaquin, for staying today with us today. And also is Hemant, Dr. Hemant from University of South Florida in United States. This team is supported by assistants and collaborators from alumni UFRO. We are very happy because our alumni are working with us. Here is Pedro. Thank you, Pedro. Consuelo Salvo and Natalia Arcos, that he is now working in ProChile, Canada. Also in the team work students for 2 faculties in the university, 2 from engineer faculty, Jonathan Jara and Oscar Aguayo, and Rosario Santibáñez from the Faculty of Law and Business, our faculty. And also collaborator with us, Isabel Mendez and Gabriela Donoso. They are the designer. The focus of this project is the south of Chile. And we are concerned about the impact of COVID in the export of Chilean agri-food products. In the case of Araucanía, these are the main agri-food product exporter in the last year. You can see here oats, processed oats, fruits, apples, blueberries, and cherries, also meat, that is frozen meat, and seeds. In the Los Rios region, we can see this here, the main exporter agri-food product of this region related to cranberry, also fruits like blueberries, salmon, or this is specific is trout, trucha, the pronunciation is trout, and also product related to milk. And in the Los Lagos region, that is the most south region of the project, the principal product is salmon, but other products like oil of, and meat and other products from the sea. I want to present to Dr. Massa from University of Malta. He is resident senior faculty at the Department of Management at the University of Malta, where he is also council representative and founding member on the Center of Entrepreneurship and Business Incubation Board, holding a PhD in Business and Management on family firms, internationalization and knowledge absorptive capacity, and an MBA. Interests include international business strategy, internationalization, international entrepreneurship, dynamic capabilities, organizational behavior, and family business research. He is associated with the Community for Internationalization and Enterprise Research at the Adam Smith Business School in the University of Glasgow, excuse me. And he has held membership at the Academy of International Business and the British Academy of Management in UK. Spanning academia and industry, he has presented research and contributed at various international colloquia, and he has been invited to workshops and delivered on his subject at foreign universities. He's also engaged in executive training for managers and practitioners in business. He will present us a paper that is South American Export Promotion Agencies, Lived Challenges and Experiences in COVID-19 Times. This paper was presented at the 14th ISACE conference in Paris, in a virtual conference. And also this paper is now was sent to the Journal of Business Research for analysis. We hope that the paper will accept by this journal. Now I want to present Dr. Monreal Perez. He is from Universidad de Murcia. He has a degree in economics and law from University Carlos III in Madrid, also a master in foreign trade, and a PhD in business science of University of Murcia. He joins the University of Murcia at the Department of Management and Finance. Over 40 international conferences, 25 papers published in the Indexed Journal, among other research merits. Especially interested in the firm internationalization, family firm, innovation, export promotion, and research method. Dr. Monreal Perez will present us the FASI data, a novel methodology that better identify causality links applied to the business management field. This method, we are working in a paper titled A Developing Country Configurational Exploration Frame Export Dynamic Capabilities and Competitiveness in COVID-19 Times the case of South Chilean agri-food exporters. This paper is in progress, and we hope to send to the Journal of Competitiveness. Well, with this presentation, I want to thank again our researchers, and I want to give the voice to Nathaniel. Please, Nathaniel, thank you very much again for staying today here.
Thank you very much, Professor Geldres-Weiss, and hello, hola, welcome to all the participants. Thank you for your kind introduction. It is my pleasure to be with you today, this afternoon, to share with you a brief snapshot from some of the interesting research that the entire team, headed by Valeska, has had going on. Allow me to share my screen, please. Okay. Very good. I understand you can now see my screen presentation. Let me just check whether I can have access to some of the annotating features here. Perhaps not. Okay, very well. As Valeska already mentioned, what I'm going to be doing is I'll be taking you through our research, the component that deals with the Export Promotion Agency's lived challenges and experience in COVID-19 times. Of course, there is a regional focus to our research, but I'll explain more about that in a few moments. So this is the way I'm going to go about my presentation. Keeping in mind that we don't have much time, I'm going to very quickly move on to the scope of our research and our key research questions. I have also been asked to give particular emphasis to our methodological approach, and in fact, I'm going to be sharing with you some basic insights on InVivo, which is the qualitative data analysis software that we've used for this part of the project. I'll then I'll walk you through some of the key findings from our research, and we'll conclude by discussing the implications from our research, and we'll have a bit of a Q&A, question and answer session, which will allow us perhaps to elaborate further on some areas that might be of particular interest to you. Just before I do move on, I know in the chat some of you asked whether you can turn your webcam on. Of course, if you wish to do so, I would like to invite you to be able to do so. If you want to, that will actually replicate a real kind of conference environment as much as possible. And it might actually enable us to relate to each other more naturally as well. But of course, this is absolutely up to you. So, very well, let's push on. So with respect to the research questions, I wanted to give you a little bit of insight as to why we decided to adopt this approach, which is perhaps not a common approach at all. What I'd like you to keep in mind is some of the obvious things that you're already aware of. COVID happened very quickly. So economies were suddenly shell-shocked. It had a double effect of influencing production because of global supply chains. And of course, because of restrictions, because of pandemic contagion. Of course, this also affected the consumer side of things and the behavioral aspects. Added to that, there was the panic situation that was very evident globally. So governments all over the world were rushing, the alarm bells were ringing, they were rushing to bring in some kind of policy to try to help businesses, to try to save the economy. So there was a lot of fragmented policy. Keep in mind that overnight, almost, global trade suddenly dropped by around about 32%. And within 8 months from the identification of the pandemic, in Wuhan, in China, already there were 1 million registered deaths. So the point is this. Much of the existing research was very much generic, quantitative based, very often based on, let's say, trade databases and so on. And although governments needed information in order to help inform their policy, however, there was hardly any research. In fact, we found no research that was specifically focused on export promotion agencies and export promotion. They were large-scale, quantitative exercises. Of course, our interest is in the South American region. But again, traditionally, research on this continent, in this part of the world, tends to be quite scarce. However, of course, it is very, very important and relevant, particularly because in South America, there are many countries that participate very actively in global value chains. We know that most of your exports surround both metals and minerals. And let's say even for Chile, for example, this constitutes close to 50%. But then there's a lot of agri-food, there's a lot of other aspects, fish and so on, that usually see a lot of participation from SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, which tend to be more vulnerable. And of course, much of these exports from this region go to, for instance, China. So there's a lot of sensitivity to global trade. And in talking about the obvious, I would like to also remind ourselves of something that's very important here. When in the region we observe that much of the exports are actually commodities, commodities are very price sensitive. And demand usually is very quickly affected in times of crisis, which in turn affects and influences the prices. So, okay, sure, fine. I mean, there were a lot of suggestions on what people should do in order to mitigate, in order to safeguard against this COVID pandemic. And you can see over here several of them. Okay, cooperation, invest in digitalization, e-commerce, transparency, sharing information, market diversification. There was all of that out there. However, we felt that we needed to address this gap. We wanted to find what was going on the front line, at ground zero to a certain extent, not simply relying on trade databases and big numbers. We wanted to find out what was really happening. So our emphasis over here, as you can see, is on the lived challenges and realities of these export promotion agencies. We wanted to hear their perspective, see what they saw, what they smelt, what they touched with their hands, the crisis, the panic, the frustration. We wanted to get a clear idea of what was happening on the battlefield, so to speak. So our two first guiding research questions would be, okay, what are the experienced realities, however, for these EPAs, these export promotion agencies? And if we're talking about all those other things like e-commerce, market diversification, and so on, are these measures being effective in our South American region? How are they being implemented in practice? So in truth, we were after questions such as, what's the reality? And in doing so, we focused on these three areas. The first was the EPAs. When I say EPA, I'm obviously referring to export promotion agencies, their perspective on the pandemic's impact on exporting SMEs. Because after all, SMEs are their clients, and their perception on their needs is very important if they are going to be able to deliver effective services to assist export promotion. We were, of course, interested in the pandemic's impact on the EPAs, their operations and response strategies, and we wanted to also get a good feel on what their perception was on what lies ahead in the future post-COVID. So let's now move on to the methodology. The methodology is qualitative. We adopted an exploratory approach and a narrative approach. We wanted to get first-hand information on the experienced realities. I need to go a little bit quicker, perhaps, at this stage. So the focus of our research was obviously on Chile. As Valeska rightly mentioned, we have dedicated particular attention to the southern macro zone, but now we're looking in this research module at Chile in general and its three neighboring countries along the west coast of the continent. We're talking about Peru and Ecuador. We engaged three national EPAs, which are government-funded, pro-Chile, from Peru, and pro-Ecuador. I've already explained the type of research. We engaged in in-depth interviews 5 elite participants. These were directors and professionals, and the advantages of this are varied. First and foremost, being elite participants, they would have been very much aware of the big picture of what was going on. They would also be in a position to inform and shape strategy, but they were also very intimate with both the operational aspects as well as the strategic issues. So this is exactly what we were after. Their operational challenges, their sense-making, the sense they made of the situation. Of course, the whole world was in a state of panic or uncertainty to a certain extent. What was their experience? And their strategic responses. So everything is contextually based. I promised I'd dedicate some time talking about in vivo. Not much time here, but I'll try to give you as quick a snapshot as possible with the help of some audiovisual aids, some very small, short video clips. So in vivo, of course, does not perform any miracles. It's a tool like any other tool. It's a tool in the same way that a chisel could be a tool in Michelangelo's hand. If Michelangelo had to give me the same chisel, it doesn't mean that I'll be able to produce the same work of art. So what I'm saying is that there's no shortcut to actually analyzing your data in a sound way. But it's a very effective tool. It's a tool that's used for in-depth analysis, for qualitative and mixed methods research. In case you're interested, you can input into it very many different types of data. So it's not just word processed documents. You can input spreadsheets and numeric data. You can also input audio files. You can input your interviews, for example, and there could be automated transcription services. I don't know whether this is available in Spanish or not, and that comes at an additional charge. And you can also, input feeds directly from social media. In case you're wondering, the commercial license, a perpetual commercial license, is around about $900, around about 881 euros. A perpetual academic license would push that down to around about 600 euros. But if you have a university license, then you can obviously pay per use. So you might be able to, make use of this product for only 5 euros a month. Okay. Let me share with you this brief video clip. I have a series of 3 video clips, 60 seconds each long.
People working on qualitative and mixed methods research projects around the world are faced with collecting, organizing, and analyzing a huge volume and variety of data every day. With its striking design, In Vivo is the most intuitive, easy-to-use, and powerful software for qualitative data analysis. In Vivo can help you organize, explore, and analyze data from virtually any source, like interviews, surveys, social media, or videos. Quickly and easily visualize results for assessment or reporting reporting with a wide range of contemporary visualizations. Enhance your research by extending the power of NVivo with all new cloud-based modules. It's never been easier to collaborate with your research team, save time by transcribing your audio files straight to NVivo, and let the power of NVivo work for you with automated functionality that enhances your research process. NVivo, powerful research.
Okay, a little bit of something about how analysis is conducted. This is the coding aspect. Okay, so you get the general idea over here. It allows you to put into different containers, different sorts of data, and then extract particular themes out of it. If I had to give you an idea of what our code book for this research would look like, for example, we could have, for instance, different themes which could either be pre-established or they could actually emerge from the data as we go along. Okay, so we don't have time to go through the code book. Of course, it was not my intention. My intention was to give you a little bit of an idea on how everything came together. Now, let's take a look at some of the key findings, the impact on exporting SMEs. It goes without saying that SMEs in these three countries were affected, in a very, very critical way. However, I do want to put something across over here, which is the fact that for some, let's say some that might have been exporting cranberries or blackberries, for some particular areas, some of the SMEs actually increased their exports. But this was not general across the board. There was a lot of initiatives that were taken on board to try to migrate to digital platforms. And some of the key things that were identified was the more you move up the value-added chain, the more you can differentiate your product offering, the more you can build value into your product, the less negatively affected those companies were. But again, size was a key issue, and here we're talking about liabilities of size and also resource limitations having a negative bearing on SMEs' capacity to actually face the pandemic. With respect to the EPAs themselves, well, it's obvious. just like any other export promotion agency, I had the opportunity to be in touch with other export promotion agencies in Europe. It was an initial state of total shock. There's total uncertainty. But the interesting thing is this. It's easy for us to look at this from a distance. What we need to keep in mind over here is the succession of different lockdowns, the sudden inability to actually function or operate because you cannot go to work physically, the need to invest in digital platforms. I mean, there was total unpreparedness for this, as expected, and this was totally disruptive. So this led the EPAs to start questioning the very fundamentals of their mission. What can we do now? So after the initial shock, then they started collaborating intensely. And I would like to actually give a little bit more color to this, because they started using all means. They started being creative in all manners of ways, collaborating with previous competitors, because normally, of course, EPAs kind of compete to attract foreign direct investment to their respective countries. But knowing they were in this pandemic, all of it together, they were actually collaborating. So you had this beautiful collaboration happening between different export promotion agencies. And also, it's amazing what a lot was done on the basis of informality and trust. I still remember one of the quotes from one of the key people from Peru actually saying, a mere phone call was more important than an MOU, more important than a memorandum of understanding, in order to actually, get things done, okay, to serve their mission. They adapted specific measures. Primarily, it was the same service portfolio, but using new creative ways to get the services across to their exporting clients. There were many innovative ways by which they did this. For example, Peru actually went out to physically collect samples, let's say, of Peruvian coffee from these small companies out in rural locations. Then they would batch them together and export them to potential importers in foreign countries. Why? Because they cannot meet at a trade fair physically. So that before they have their Zoom tete-a-tete, they would have smelt the aroma of the coffee beforehand. They would have been able to touch the product, the leather, whatever it was. In Pro Ecuador's case, they engaged in a lot of things. But they also discovered that some of these mega virtual trade conferences, which cost a lot of money, weren't being so effective. So they started to proactively source potential clients and have like these curated dating sessions. They realized that owners of SMEs struggling to survive, working from home, actually didn't have time to spend the whole day in front of their laptop at a virtual trade conference. But they did have time for a focused 45-minute Zoom call with a potential client. So this is only a small taster of many of the things that, rich things that came out. With respect to looking ahead post-COVID, the expectations were that things aren't going to return to normal very quickly in the region. So the expectation of the EPAs was 2024, 2025, not earlier. They realized that there is a need for increased identification, strategic identification of potential exporters. The priority on information, as well as investments in both new product development to move up the value proper, as well as investment in technologies, was very important. I need to now start wrapping up. So, some of the strategic intentions of these EPAs were the following. They stressed the importance of innovation if their exporting companies are going to remain competitive in tomorrow's international markets. They also noted that some of the consumer behavioral shifts in tomorrow's new world are going to require new product development and new channels. So this isn't going to go away. If people now are more familiar with digital platforms, well, they can be used, and people will expect to use them. Production networks and their vulnerability in such a situation are, of course, very much highlighted. Their concern was also on something that they already knew, but they realized that this now is something that needs to be tackled strategically. Over-dependence on raw materials and commodities, and perhaps agri-food products with not a lot of processing, not a lot of value added built into them, although, of course, they are excellent world-class products. So with that, some of the realizations were the following. We observed that the export promotion agencies were extremely important in mitigating risk perception for these exporting EPAs. They were literally picking up the phone and contacting these companies, using any means, high-tech and low-tech, at their disposal. With respect to managing shortcomings that were already evident before the pandemic, all three EPAs stressed the importance to tackle in a holistic, strategic way these elements at firm level, at agency level, and at national policy levels. And they also realized that from their own operational perspective, they would need to continue adopting a hybrid approach to be more effective, more efficient, faster. Yes, nothing beats the intimacy of being face-to-face at a trade conference. But perhaps these new technologies, now that we've learned how to use, now that we've become experts at using Zoom and Microsoft Teams or Google Meet, how can we use this better in reinforcing our relationships? So moving forward, we've already mentioned this hybrid element. The thing that we need to keep in mind also over here is that these export promotion agencies were, to a certain extent, how shall I say this? In some ways, performing what was normally thought to be almost unachievable under situations of reduced budgets and also redundancies. Keep in mind, it's not only the pandemic. I would like us to also keep in mind that some export promotion agencies also pointed out that the pandemic almost was the second wave for them. So I think it was Peru that mentioned, hey, listen, there was already a lot of social unrest, a lot of strikes taking place at ports, employees, a lot of unsettled activity going on, and then the pandemic comes. So I just wanted to highlight here one key element that came out of this. The resolute, enterprising nature of these South American APAs was amazing from my perspective. It's in how they managed, in the face of adversity and a lot of, reduced resources, to creatively find lean and resource-light approaches to find these creative solutions to overcome challenges. They were very committed to their mission, to actually help these exporting SMEs. And the final slide, some of our key contributions over here, it's that we've provided direct, vivid detail from a privileged first-hand perspective, people who are actually living this. We provided also contextual knowledge on the impact of COVID on export promotion agencies, because we didn't find anything about this, especially in the case of South American EPAs. We've also seen, as expected, however, we can empirically now say that we confirm this, that business risks were considerably amplified in the case of SMEs. We offered insight on perhaps what can help inform policy in this region, and also best practice for other EPAs in other regions. What can they learn from what's going on in South America? And ultimately, in this new world reality for SMEs and EPAs, this whole change in consumption patterns, the likelihood that green matters, that environmentalism is going to become much more important. These aspects need to be further studied, and also they need to be strategically tackled by exporters all over the world, because the demand for these types of products is going to be only increasing. With that, I bring the session to a close. I do hope that you found some interest in it, and I would welcome any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Nathaniel. Thank you very much. Very, very perfect, your presentation. At the final of the both presentators, we can do some questions, and you can send the question in the chat, and Pedro can organize the questions, and we have 15 minutes to talk about your visions, questions, or concerns. Then I want to give the possibility to Joaquin for presentation. Please, Joaquin.
Thanks, Valeska. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes, everyone. I will try to share my screen. Can you see it?
Perfect.
Is it okay? Okay, first, I would like to thank all the attendants for being here, especially to my students, Regina and Omar, who are currently elaborating their dissertation, which I am directing, and that they are very likely to use this methodology in which I'm not an expert, and that I will try to introduce their basics from a practical perspective applied to our current research. Finally, I would like to thank to my father for his presence, although not having a particular interest in knowing this methodology. Secondly, as Valeska has formerly said, I am a professor, a researcher from the University of Murcia in Spain, the southeast of Spain. I want to thank also Valeska and to this Chilean institution for inviting me to participate in such a seminar, which I hope that will be appealing for the attendance. Sorry,
Es que estabas en la última diapositiva.
Okay, I don't know why. Sí. Okay, this is the first one. This is the first one, the index. I will, as I said in this presentation, I will start in the introduction of this fuzzy set methodology, not with a purpose of being very exhaustive and technical in explaining the fuzzy method, but with the aim that these basic concepts are clear, since this method is further implemented in the work that we are currently elaborating. In such an introductory part, I will establish which is the logic behind the configurational reasoning in which the fuzzy set methodology roots, and this of the fuzzy set method. And finally, I will make clear the distinction between the variables this method uses and the conventional variables used in other traditional regression techniques. In trying to make more understandable the concepts introduced in the first part, we will run an example with all the steps that are furtherly followed in our work. Thirdly, for the case that you decide to use this methodology, I will let you know which software freely available in a website for its download I use. Moreover, it offers a detailed manual with instructions of how to use the software. Finally, the last part is devoted to the article in which Valeska, Nathan, and myself are currently working on. Okay, the main advantage of a configurational approach relative to other conventional techniques is that it better identifies causality relationships between antecedent variables and their outputs. It is because such causality is complex, but basically because causes for a given output are multiple and interdependent. What is conjunction and equifinality? This is opposite to traditional linear methodologies that are based on the assumption of unifinality or the existence of only one optimal model that best fits the empirical data. In sum, when trying to explain a variable, this method allows us to identify the whole recipe, the combination of ingredients. There are many concepts in daily life that are subjective and fuzzy in nature. For example, is that place far or near? For some, 20 kilometers away may be far, and for some may be near. This method doesn't count distance as 0 or 1, as dichotomous qualitative case variable do, but classifies such distance according to a 0-1 interval, but within this interval taking a number of different punctuations. Let's see with an example referred to weight, as you can see in the slide. When establishing categories, most would say that being less than 70 kilograms is being light, 80 kilograms is being medium weighted, and over 100 kilograms is being heavy. Nevertheless, there are some weights that are bad. For example, 78 kilos is it light or medium? 88 kilos is medium or heavy. Moreover, one don't use to say people being 200 centimeters tall need big cars, but tall people need big cars. That is why we categorize variables, but the ideal is not to lose richness in the information. What is tall? 190 centimeters and beyond is tall, or is it 185 centimeters and beyond? This concept is imprecise. Furthermore, one can have a quality, but not at 100%. For example, Richard is greedy most of the times, but he's not sometimes. How to consider him? One way, as fast as it does, is punctuating him neither 0 nor 1, but closer to 1, with, for example, 0.7. The fuzzy set offers a technique that more adequately manages back information. In this line, traditionally, we account for two types of variables, quantitative or purely qualitative one, being most of them two values, dichotomous ones. In fact, fuzzy set variables are also named semi-quantitative variables. For a graphical example, see the one that is shown in the slide with the variable temperature. When looking at the set distribution graphic, every category is coded either 0 or 1. While in the fuzzy one, there may be infinite values within 0 and 1 for every category, allowing to be overlaps within the categories. The mixed fuzzy zones. Quantitative ones provide much information but are not frequently used in real life. That is why we categorize variable, but the ideal is not to lose richness, as I said. Qualitative crisp variables only consider few cases, reduce information at only usually too few cases, but don't consider at what distance you are. Following the previous head example, is one being 170 centimeters as short as one being 150. If we code them with a zero in the variable tall, we are considering both the same. Fuzzy set overcome both limitations by taking values ranging from 0 to 1, but in a quantitative way. Following the sample, if we consider 185 and beyond as tall, one sizing 170 tall may be 0.7 tall, while one 160 0.4 tall. This way, we are ordering sizes depending on their degree of membership, of proximity with the established threshold. After introducing the key basic concepts, let's see an example in which the fuzzy set method is carried out. The first step corresponds to the calibration of the variables that are not already dichotomous, that are not already dichotomous crisp ones, which are the criteria to establish the membership scales, which values cost for full membership it is 1 and which one for non-membership 0. It may be done both subjectively by considering previous evidence, expert literature, opinions or interviews, or also objectively, depending on the distribution of the sample, and furtherly, it may be justified by comparing with previous evidence, expert literature, opinions, interviews, and so on. The subjective procedure is less biased than the objective one, since it doesn't depend on the respondents, while the objective procedure offers the advantage of being more impartial and easy to follow. Let's see this example again with the temperature. Above, one can see the subjective calibration procedure, while below, the subjective one, accounting for the sample distribution. The next step is the first one that needs to be done with the fuzzy set software. It is called the necessary analysis, and it implies the identification of causes in a single basis that is similar to conventional techniques that isolatedly out of any configuration may produce a cause. When visiting a work using fuzzy clause, past year, accepted but yet unpublished, and the factor that together with being a more global firm, this export and be less than 5 years old determine the firm export intensity. It can be seen that none of the factors of the table are single causes. Consistency value is greater than 0.9. Following with an example of a fuzzy set, the next step is now identifying which configuration has to be considered for the solution that will be reached furtherly. As can be seen in the example from a work from past year on the role of export promotion programs on the firm export activity, the selected configurations where the export group presents a 1 are these fulfilling the next two conditions. They have a frequency greater than 1. This is the default value in the software, but this limit should be higher in greater samples, and show a consistency greater than 0.8. As a result of the fulfillment of both conditions, 40 considerations need to be considered. The next step, once the causes configuration are identified, is to determine which is the final solution that drives to the desired result. In our example, extracted again from the paper on Bond Global Firm, the selected solution by the software are these three configurations. The three shown in the slide. This configuration leads the firm to increase its export intensity, high consistency, but having a high export intensity is not fully explained by any configuration since they have low coverage. This is the software where all the tools to follow can be obtained. All these tools are available at a public and free website. The author of such software and on the manual that explains all the steps to follow and how to interpret the meaning of the outputs of the software is named Charles Ryan from the University of Arizona, United States. Everything is very easy to follow, and even the suggestions made in the manual are useful to justify every step in a high-quality reference journal. Now, in the last part, I will explain what we did using the fuzzy set methodology. The work authored by Valeska, Nathan, and myself aims to disentangle which configuration of internal dynamic capabilities together with external competitive advantage lead the firm to achieve a high export performance. All this taking into account the agri-food Chilean southern context and the COVID-19 one. Dynamic capabilities refer to the ability of the firm to adapt its resources to the current period, dominated by the COVID-19 crisis. In the international area, this adaptation capacity is of great importance since the firm has to face more competitors, high obstacles that are extremely high in this period. Chile agri-food products are very exposed to supply chains continuity, are not very geographically diversified, and are very price sensitive, with usually low added value. And all this has been impacted severely by the COVID-19. Finally, the competitive advantage implied the strength of the firm in competing in sport arenas. Increasing, it has been stressed that the internal capability had to fit the competitive advantage to lead to a superior export performance. In sum, the previous arguments can be synthesized in the following research model. Under the context of COVID-19 and considering agri-food exports of the Chilean southern zone, we analyze configuration of the three following concepts. Some demographic control variables, the four dynamic capabilities pointed by Efrat et al. In 2018, and the four competitive advantage based on four aspects, also according to these same authors. As can be seen in the slide, two potential outcomes are considered: the firm export intensity and the firm export performance, a price depending on which firm responded according to the four items highlighted by Efrat et al. In 2018. Finally, some methodological considerations should be stated. We believe that what matters in being more export competitive are the combination of dynamic capabilities and of competitive advantage. To identify such combinations, a configurational approach of the facilitated one is very adequate. We follow an inductive approach since there is no previous literature on which specific configurations between both concepts exist. We cannot hypothesize justifiably any previous effect. We may contribute by providing a deep exploration of such an interplay between both concepts. And finally, our analysis is a factual approach, and therefore its results may be limited to our sample of Chilean firms, not to others. Thanks for your attention, and I hope that with that presentation, one have it clearer what is this method and what our paper is about. To make it even clearer, questions and comments are really welcomed. Anyway, please feel free to send me an email if you have any further question, suggestion, or comment. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joaquin. Thank you very much, Nathaniel. Very clear your presentation. Both methods are different, and both researchers explain first a qualitative method, and then Joaquin a quali-quanti method. Thus are the method that we are applying in our research in this project, in the both examples that we share with you. I want to ask you, me gustaría preguntar si hay preguntas, las pueden hacer en español y intentaremos traducirlas. Mi inglés no es muy fuerte, pero es posible. Do you have some questions, some comments, please? I have here some question in my WhatsApp. What is export intensity for Joaquin, please?
Export intensity is the proportion of export sales compared to total sales. It's a proportion from 0 to 1. How many exports the firm make in comparison to relative to total sales.
Thank you. Joaquín, ¿puedes cerrar tu presentación, por favor?
Of course. Sorry.
Some other comments from the students. Los estudiantes pueden preguntar en español. Los profesores.
Hey, may I ask Nathaniel a question?
Please, Eva.
Thank you. So what I was wondering if you would like to sort of highlight something that maybe you haven't, because of time, managed to present in this time, especially as regards to uncertainty. I study resilience of socio-ecosystems, and obviously this was the biggest trial by fire, right? So if what we usually are, you know, like as human beings in the sort of state of uncertainty practically always, right? And the pandemic has just highlighted that to the biggest extent. So these experts, these elite informants that whom you have interviewed, could you share with us what were they, how were they interpreting uncertainty? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Eva. Well, you couldn't have put it in a better way, actually, and it shows that your area of interest is resilience. Nobody really likes uncertainty. Everybody likes to know what to expect tomorrow, right? Or the day after. And if possible, if we could have a crystal ball, we'd probably pay for it. The thing is this, as you rightly pointed out, this was a situation of such magnitude, in living memory, nobody has experienced this. It doesn't mean that such black swan events, haven't happened in the past. Neither does it mean it won't happen in the future. However, the point is this, and I'm sure you can relate to this, that most of our classical notions of strategy tend to be based on looking ahead into the future. And much of the sense that we make about what to expect in the future very often is based on a variety of things, either historical past performance, on the basis of our current modus operandi, but also on our own experiential knowledge. We get used to certain routines, we know what to expect, and so on and so forth. The truth is this. It needn't necessarily, this is my personal, take. I'm shooting from the hip here. It needn't necessarily be a COVID pandemic that rocks our boat. In certain industries and sectors, especially those that are particularly volatile, the challenge to classical notions of strategy are de rigueur. They continuously happen. Let's say in biotechnology or in certain aspects of technology, you can hardly fog a mirror and even hope to anticipate what the world situation is going to be like in 15 months from now or 24 months from now. So the strategies that they tend to adopt then, in such cases, are more like portfolio investment strategies. Perhaps Google adopts such a strategic approach. They seed a lot of concepts, they see which ones are gaining traction, they see which ones aren't, then they scale up those that are, so it's a rapid response, adjustment to realities, almost, excuse the pun, in vivo, as things are happening. So there is this kind of adaptability. But of course, we're not talking about Google here. We're talking about, export promotion usually is, and I don't want to sound condescending, but usually you can pretty much anticipate what needs to be done, where the trends are from trade data and so on and so forth. So it's a totally different situation. And in such cases, what really came across was how limiting, how much of a handicap it is when an organization that is not used to these systems ends up in such a situation without any form of dynamic capabilities. Incidentally, Professor Joaquim Monreal Perez was just talking about dynamic capabilities, and this is also an area that we're looking quite attentively at on another part of our research. The point I'm trying to put across is this. In truth, I haven't even managed in this brief presentation to put across the richness, the vivid details of actually don't expect anything that, fits in perfectly in line with theories. It's a very messy reality, as you can imagine, a little bit like an entrepreneur's startup situation where there's so much going on. So in truth, when things were changing from day to day, okay, new policies coming in. One day we're hoping that the lockdown will be eased. The next day, no, we've got another month of lockdown. Then our lockdown in our country is eased. But of course, all of these waves were happening asynchronously. So perhaps when Chile might be out of its lockdown, Malta might then be getting into its fourth lockdown or its third lockdown. So there was total mayhem. And in truth, they were literally finding a problem, as in the case of, all organizations. This is not unique to, South American EPAs, but it's a mindset issue. You need to realize that everything you knew about in the past has now been seriously jeopardized and isn't so relevant anymore. So it's the kind of unlearning what gave us our secure platform to plan ahead and learning to roll with the punches, literally being flexible instead of, using some high-tech new process, just picking up the phone, just leveraging your social networks. So yes, there was a lot of this. And perhaps if you'll have the opportunity to, at some point, read the published paper, there'll be more of that as well, that really comes across beautifully, the richness of the experiences. So it was literally sometimes, okay, and I'm sure this doesn't perhaps notch many brownie points, but it's sometimes, realizing that you're walking blind, that you need to keep your ears sharp, and you need to, from an entrepreneurial perspective, recognize opportunities in order to be able to exploit them at the opportune moment. I'm not too sure whether I've effectively answered your question. It's not an easy question to answer, but I've tried to put across, what sometimes rocks the foundation of our management theories in reality, and how it actually transposed itself in the experiences of these export promotion agencies.
Thanks so much.
Great. No, that was perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some of you have other questions? Joaquin.
Yeah, I would. I know that is the term for questions, but I would like to add, as Nathan already said, the effort and the entrepreneurial spirit of the promotion agencies, though being very short of resources and being surprised by this pandemic, they were able to react, to adapt every tool, and to do very much with very few resources. And I would like just to add this. They did a very good task in promoting exports with very few tools.
Yes, and in fact, if I may complement what Joaquim is saying, in other interactions I might have had with other export promotion agencies, in various cases, their budgets might have been actually supplemented. But in the case of these, just to stress and highlight the amazing job these export promotion agencies were doing, they literally, under a crisis situation, where sometimes, stability wasn't exactly optimal even before the pandemic crisis. We had situations where in one region, for example, pre-pandemic, 3 out of 4 ports were actually not operating because of strikes. Now think of this. During the pandemic, there was a big demand for certain foodstuffs, especially superfoods and, foods that are healthy. So imagine this situation. There is a big demand out there in the world. Yes, there are pandemic restrictions which create complications for bringing the product to market. But even if you could export the product, so there's a pandemic and there's the demand, some of the ports are actually closed because of strikes. But not only that, other export promotion agencies perhaps did not have to contend with, literally in the face of the pandemic, have their financial budget restricted or needing to lay off employees. So in the case of, for example, Pro Ecuador, they actually, in a way, it's a double-edged sword. As they say in entrepreneurship, necessity is the mother of invention. They had to get more done with less. But this helped transform, if we had to get something good out of this, it helped transform the organization into a leaner, more efficient, data-driven export promotion agency, which can much more smartly and, surgically target what needs to be targeted. Excuse me.
Thanks so much, Nathaniel. I would like to ask to Joaquin to comment, please. What is the more difficult topic in FASI method? Because you explained that the FASI method is related to the theory set and is related with the topic that we learn in the school. And we have software that is free. And then what is the what are the challenges in use this method, and why is so popular in business area today?
Thanks. Very good question. I think that unfortunately, it's not very much applied to the business area. One may find more work with this method in engineer thing, because it has a very practical application. For example, in air conditioning, when establishing which is the optimal temperature, that is very subjective. Or in the time you need to lift your coffee machine or whatever. So there are a lot of papers on this, but in the management, I think it's increasing more and more important, because I think it has a very big potential. But at the moment, I think it's very novel and there are very few papers on the management area. But I think it's very useful, since it provides a lot of information, and the life is fuzzy. Everything is fuzzy. Everything depends on and when talking, you don't say, with a regression, you estimate coefficient and effect. But this is not very practical. Nobody used that. People used to say, when having this characteristic, or when being, for example, too hot and being at home, you open the window, you relate concepts, but very subjective one, depending on what you consider that is hot, warm, or you consider that this humid or whatever. All these are subjective things, not objective. So I think this is definitely the feature. And in the management area, it has not been very much used. Yeah, that's all. Thanks for the question.
Thank you so much. Nathaniel?
Yes, I was actually reflecting on this. I very much enjoyed Joaquim's presentation. And it's quite a curious situation, because when we talk about the social sciences and human behavior, essentially, I mean, most of it is, to use the term, fuzzy, isn't it? It's not just ones and zeros, and people have different perceptions. In just the same way we were talking about entrepreneurship, it's part science, but part art, interpretation, perspectives. So yes, it's quite curious that, it hasn't picked up so much in this area. So I enjoyed your presentation, Joaquin.
Thank you so much, Nathaniel. Well, if we don't have more questions, we can going to finish this interesting conference. We are a very international team with different knowledge, from different countries, of course, and we are in a process of learning, and we are applying different methods to know the reality and to know what is happened with COVID-19 and the export companies. That is our vision, and we hope to give knowledge to the science related about this interesting area of the south of Chile related to COVID-19. Thank you very much for your attention, and have a good day. And thank you, Nathaniel. Thank you, Joaquin, and thanks for all for stay here today sharing our project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Valeska, and thank you, Joaquim, and all the participants.
Yeah, I reiterate the thanks for all the attendants, for Nathan, for Valeska, for the University of La Frontera, for everyone. It was a pleasure to be there. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have
Bye.
a nice day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.